Hello, comrades. Tonight we welcome a man whose name echoes through the halls of history, for better or worse. He turned Europe into his personal chessboard and had the audacity to crown himself emperor. Please welcome, and I say this with tremendous ideological reluctance, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Very well, thank you, Karl. This is nice. How you say talk show?
Ha ha ha, something like that. We call it a podcast. Thanks for coming, Bonnie. So how are you doing?
Excellent, Karl. Though I am still getting used to these modern arrangements. But I am Napoleon. I adapt quickly to any situation.
Well, adapting quickly certainly served you well in your conquests, though I suppose this is a bit different from adapting to Russian winters.
We just started and already you are making jokes about my failures? Save some for later in the interview, Karl.
All right. So what's it like being here? Are you staying nearby?
Yes, a small hotel. The people there are very excited to meet me. They keep asking questions, mostly about history and stuff. What about you? Do people recognize you much?
Not as much as you, I think. Maybe my beard helps sometimes. So, Bonnie, we're going to talk about revolution and power and all that. Sound good?
Sounds perfect. I have many thoughts on these topics. I feel the world has forgotten what it means to witness real imperial genius. It is time to educate them.
Okay, let's get started then. You emerged from the same revolutionary fervor that toppled the monarchy, yet ended up crowning yourself emperor. Some might call that a contradiction.
The revolution gave birth to chaos before it could deliver on its promises. I did not abandon revolutionary ideals, Karl. I secured them.
By creating a new aristocracy and placing a crown on your head? How fascinating. Please explain how that preserved liberty, equality, and fraternity.
The revolution was drowning in its own blood, Karl. The Directory was corrupt and ineffective. France needed stability to protect what had been won. Unlike the Bourbons, I created a system where men could rise based on talent, not birth.
Yes, your famous meritocracy. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you eventually make your own brother king of Spain? Your stepson viceroy of Italy? Your son the king of Rome?
Those were just strategic appointments. My family understood what we fought for.
Oh, really? What exactly was that?
Order without regression, progress without anarchy. The revolution promised rights to the people but delivered terror. I gave them the civil code, religious freedom, and national pride while preserving the fundamental social changes. What good are principles if society collapses around them?
So you position yourself as a practical revolutionary. Interesting contradiction.
Not all revolutionaries have the luxury of being theorists, my friend. Some of us had to make difficult decisions in real time, with real consequences. History isn't made in libraries.
History isn't made solely on battlefields either. But let me ask you this. Did you ever consider that in trying to save the revolution from chaos, you might have betrayed its most essential promise?
Which promise? The promise of mob rule? Of endless purges? Or the promise that a cobbler's son could rise to govern Europe? Because that promise, that talent matters more than birth, I kept alive when I could have easily restored the old order for personal gain.
Yet you chose to be called emperor rather than first citizen or president. Why the need for imperial trappings?
People need symbols, Karl. The revolutionaries understood this when they created their own rituals and symbols. I simply gave France symbols that inspired greatness rather than further division. A nation is held together by more than just laws or principles.
On that point, we might find some agreement, though I suspect we define greatness quite differently. What does greatness mean to you?
Greatness is when history is forced to revolve around your decisions. It's not a title, or a crown, or a seat in some council. It's when your will becomes the law of nations. I did not ask for the world to follow me. I made it impossible for them not to.
You made it impossible for the world not to follow you? A compelling line, Bonnie. History bending to your will. It's the language of force, not freedom. You speak as if power justifies itself through momentum. But power doesn't rise in a vacuum. It feeds off blood, labor, and empire. So tell me, when did you first realize the world was bending to you? Was there a moment, a battle, a victory, when you knew you weren't just winning, you were conquering?
I never pretended to be a servant of pure ideology. I was a man of action. I saw opportunities where others saw rules. At Arcole, at Rivoli, on the streets of Paris, I made choices that changed history. Not because I dreamed of empire, but because the old world was dying and someone had to take command of what came next. That someone was me, the little corporal.
Interesting. You saw opportunities where others saw rules, you say, but taking command of what comes next, that sounds like you appointed yourself to decide France's fate. What gave you that right?
I was a child of the revolution, but I knew liberty alone wasn't enough. France needed structure. After the Directory collapsed under its own corruption, they wanted stability, and I offered that. The moment they handed me power willingly, not by force, was when I knew the world was ready to be shaped.
If the people gave you power to bring them order, I wonder, did they also request the Peninsula War, the Continental System, or the Grande Armée freezing in retreat from Russia? Or were those just side effects of your stabilizing touch?
Listen, Karl, I did. What was required? Peace without strength is illusion. I brought order not just to France, but to a continent gripped by decaying thrones. My laws endure where monarchies fell, Karl. While others debated, I acted, and the world moved, and that's the fact.
While others debated, you acted? But at what cost? Your code may endure, but so do the mass graves across Europe. Did the dead agree with your version of order, or were they simply the foundation stones of your empire?
Ah, yes. Because your ideology has been so gentle with the living. The gulags, the purges, the famines. Tell me, my friend, how many millions died chasing your vision of the workers' paradise? You speak of graves? I see them stretching across the 20th century, dug in the name of utopia. You lecture me on graves, Karl. Really? I dealt in armies and empires, and you dealt in ideas that turned into regimes more brutal than any ancient regime I toppled. At least I never claimed my wars were for universal liberation.
Well, history has made monsters of many ideas, including mine. I won't defend what I didn't direct, but there's a difference between an idea twisted by successors and power seized by design. You saw the cost of your ambition in real time and pressed forward. That's the part I can't ignore. Let's talk about faith now. So, you restored the Catholic Church after the Revolution tried to tear it down. You called yourself a man of reason, but made deals with popes, paraded through cathedrals. So I'll ask plainly, did you ever actually believe?
Believe? In God? In the church? Haha. Karl, I believed in what worked. The people needed something to hold on to after years of chaos. Religion gives them comfort, structure, hope. I gave them back their saints, their ceremonies, their Sunday masses. Is that not what a leader should do? Give his people what they need?
They need food, dignity, and power over their lives. And yet you gave them rituals instead of rights. You talk about stability, but I think what you really mean is control.
Control is not always oppression, my friend. You see religion as a chain, but I saw it as glue. After revolution, famine, civil war, people were exhausted. They didn't want more speeches. They wanted something familiar, comfort, continuity, as I said before.
You gave them illusions, what I meant by the opiate of masses, not because religion is evil, but because it teaches people to accept suffering. It says, be poor, be humble, your reward is in heaven. It numbs them to injustice. That's what I fought.
Illusions? I gave them order. You speak of fighting injustice, but where are your victories? I ended the chaos. I gave careers to merit. I built roads and schools. Your revolution exists only on paper, while mine rebuilt a nation.
You built schools, yes, but what did they teach? To obey authority, to accept their station in life. You gave them roads to travel to churches where they learned that suffering is virtuous. That's not progress. That's more sophisticated control.
Karl, my schools taught mathematics, science, engineering. I created the first modern educational system in Europe. Before me, only nobles learned to read. I gave every French child that chance. And yes, I taught respect for order. Have you seen what happens when there is no order? Look at your Germans today, always arguing about everything.
Engineering, mathematics, well, very practical. Well, as for modern Germans, they've truly mastered the art of swift action. Why make a decision today when you can debate it for another delightful year?
That's what I thought. You speak of control through religion. What about control through endless political discussions? I hear the Europeans today spend more time in parliaments arguing than actually governing. Very inefficient.
Oh, Bonnie, those parliaments, what a beautiful theater they've created. The bourgeoisie arguing over which shade of capitalism to paint the walls while the workers watch from the gallery, thinking they have a voice. It's like watching children play dress-up as politicians. Very entertaining, completely pointless.
You know, when I needed to cross the Alps, I didn't form a committee to discuss it. I just did it. Action over discussion, results over rhetoric.
Well, at least your dictatorship was honest about being a dictatorship. These modern politicians pretend the people rule while the banks write the laws. Give me an emperor over a bought parliament any day. At least we know who's really in charge.
Wow, you are defending Emperor Karl. What a strange world this is.
Now we're getting to the heart of it, your military campaigns. You certainly had a talent for moving armies around Europe. Though I wonder, was all that marching really necessary?
When I took power, France was surrounded by enemies. Austria, Prussia, Britain, all wanting to crush the revolution and restore the old kings. You think I marched across Europe for fun? I was defending the principles of 1789.
But how do you go from defending France to ruling most of Europe? That's quite an expansion of the defense strategy.
Well, you cannot just defend. That is the mistake of weak leaders. When your enemies form coalition after coalition against you, you must strike first. At Austerlitz, I faced the combined armies of Austria and Russia. Should I have waited for them to march to Paris?
Yeah, that was your famous victory. Walk me through that. How does a man from Corsica end up commanding armies against emperors?
That was my greatest masterpiece. I had 73,000 men against their 85,000. But numbers mean nothing when you have position and timing. I let them think they were winning, drew them onto the frozen ponds. Then I struck at their center, split their army in two, sent thousands through the ice. The Tsar fled. The Austrian emperor begged for terms. One day, one battle, and I redrew the map of Europe.
Yeah, it's remarkable. But I'm curious, when you're planning these campaigns, what drives you? Is it really about defending French principles, or is there something more personal?
Personal? Of course it is. Every great achievement is personal. But my personal glory served France. When I won, France won. When French eagles flew over conquered capitals, every French citizen shared that triumph.
And what about the cost? How do you weigh the lives lost against the victories gained?
A general who counts casualties will never win a war. But if you must know, every man who died under my command died for something greater than himself. That is more than most men can say about their deaths.
Interesting perspective. Now let's talk about Russia. What happened there? Everyone knows it didn't go as planned.
Well, Russia was necessary but impossible. The Tsar kept breaking his promises. He kept trading with the British behind my back. I needed to teach him a lesson. So I assembled the Grande Armée, 600,000 men, the largest army in history.
600,000. That's enormous. What was the plan?
Quick campaign. One decisive battle. Force Alexander to negotiate. I had done it dozens of times before. March to Moscow, defeat their army, dictate terms. Simple.
Then what happened? It wasn't simple, was it?
The Russians? They refused to fight. They kept retreating, burning everything behind them. No supplies, no decisive battle, and that cursed winter came early. By the time we reached Moscow, the city was empty. They had burned their own capital rather than let me have it.
And the retreat?
The retreat? Let's not call it that. It was a strategic withdrawal. But yes, it was catastrophic. The greatest army in history became, well, you know the stories.
That must have been devastating personally. How do you cope with such a massive failure?
Failure? No. No, my friend. Setback. I still had all of Europe under my control. One bad campaign does not erase 20 victories. The mistake was not knowing when to stop. Russia was too big, too empty, too cold. Some conquests are not worth the price.
And what about your soldiers? What did you tell them when you asked them to march across a continent?
I told them the truth, that we were making history, that their children would read about their courage in books. A soldier wants glory more than gold. They followed me because I gave them something to believe in.
And did they believe until the end?
Most did. Even at Waterloo they shouted, "Vive l'Empereur," as they charged. You cannot buy that kind of loyalty. You must earn it through victory after victory, until you don't.
Waterloo? Tell me about that final battle.
I should have won, you know. Had Wellington beaten by noon, would have crushed Blucher's Prussians by evening. But Grouchy was late, my cavalry charged too early, and that cursed rain made the ground too soft for artillery.
It sounds like you remember every detail.
Every general remembers his defeats better than his victories. Victories feel inevitable afterward, but defeats feel like someone else's fault. But Waterloo? That was mine. I grew careless and overconfident. Age, perhaps.
Do you regret any of it? The campaigns, the wars, the lives lost?
Regret? Karl, you cannot make an omelette without breaking egg. I broke many eggs, yes, but I made quite an omelette. The Code Napoleon, merit over birth, religious tolerance, educational systems, these outlasted my empire.
But was there another way? Could you have achieved those reforms without conquering half of Europe?
Could you achieve workers' revolution without violence? Sometimes, my friend, change requires force. The old world does not surrender peacefully to the new. I forced Europe into the modern age at gunpoint.
That's certainly one way to put it. Any advice for modern military leaders?
Study logistics before tactics, know your enemy's weaknesses, and never invade Russia in winter. Understand that war is politics by other means. Every battle must serve a political purpose, or it is just expensive murder.
Very well. Before we close, Bonnie, what do you make of the modern world, the global situation, the new powers, the way nations conduct themselves now?
The world today is enormous. When I ruled, Europe was the world. Now you have America, China, India, powers I never dreamed of. But what strikes me most is how slow everything moves. These modern leaders, they talk for months about what I would decide in an afternoon.
Haha, yes, the pace of decision-making has certainly changed. What did you think of these new superpowers?
America? Impressive. They have the ambition I admire, though they seem confused about how to use their power. China? Now there is an empire that understands long-term thinking. Very smart. As for Russia? Still cold, still vast, still difficult to conquer. Some things never change.
And what about Europe today, the European Union?
The European Union? What a brilliant idea executed so poorly. They achieved what I tried to do, unite Europe, but through committees instead of conquest. Much more peaceful, much less efficient. I conquered Europe in 10 years. They are still arguing about budgets after 70.
True. And what about the current conflicts around the world?
These modern wars is so complicated. Nuclear weapons, cyber attacks, economic sanctions. In my day, you lined up your armies and fought. Winner takes all, very simple. Now they fight with computers and currencies. Less dramatic, but perhaps more clever.
Yeah, you're right. And any final thoughts for today's leaders?
Leaders today have more power than I ever dreamed of, but they seem afraid to use it decisively. Sometimes you must make the hard choice and accept the consequences. History remembers those who act, not those who hesitate.
Wise words from a man who certainly knew how to act. Bonnie, thank you for this fascinating conversation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Karl. Most entertaining, though I still say my revolution accomplished more than yours.
We'll let history be the judge of that. Before we close, I must say I've spent days just to make this video, so I'm truly honored if you enjoyed it and would subscribe to the channel. This was our very first episode, so please let me know what you thought. Any suggestions for improving the show or ideas for future guests would be most welcome. I apologize if tonight wasn't quite what you expected. We had to keep it rather short due to my limited credits. Thank you all for watching. Good night, everyone.